He described the procession coming down Pennsylvania Avenue. There was the car carrying the outgoing president, Mr. Hoover, and the president-elect, Mr. Roosevelt. President Hoover's face is stern and unsmiling, the announcer said. He doesn't wave or pay any attention to the crowds. People have been rough on President Hoover, Janie told me quietly. They blame him for everything. You know very well that no one man could have made all this mess. Why do they have to pin it all on Mr. Hoover? I shook my head, hoping she would be quiet so that I could hear more. The announcer went on. Those near him say that Mr. Roosevelt seems preoccupied with his thoughts. He and Mr. Hoover are not conversing. The president-elect seems to share President Hoover's attitude of brooding. We listened for a long time to the announcer's description of the scene. Then at last he told us excitedly that Mr. Roosevelt was walking slowly down a ramp, leaning on the arm of his son for support. He's crippled, you know, Janie whispered to me. Lots of people don't realize it because he never talks about it, or acts as if he's any different. But he is. Polio. He can't walk anymore. He can't walk alone. The announcer's voice had become very tense. The Marine band has just finished playing Hail to the Chief. He said in a low but excited voice, Charles Evans Hughes, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, is awaiting Mr. Roosevelt's approach to the lectern. Gray, splendid old Mr. Hughes, who was himself so nearly a president in 1916. Did you know that? Janie asked me, her voice excited too. People were actually saying President Hughes, and then the last votes came in that elected Woodrow Wilson. Finally, she was quiet, and I could hear the announcer again. The wind is blowing Mr. Hughes' white hair. Mr. Roosevelt is very pale. He is at the lectern now. He is placing his right hand on the Bible. I felt tense and strangely moved. Maybe it was because I was weak, but as I heard the strange voice, so different from the voices I had heard all my life, when I heard that voice repeat the oath of office after Chief Justice Hughes, I felt tears come into my eyes. The unfamiliar words had a sonorous ring. I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God. Janie pretended not to notice that I was deeply moved. She sat like a boy astride a chair with her hands clasped loosely over the chair's back. All right, Mr. Roosevelt, she muttered. I made Lonnie vote for you. Now let's see what you can do. The new president was speaking. This is a day of national conservation, he said. I wondered what Mr. Hoover was thinking. I went on listening, not understanding all of what he said, then suddenly aware of something that seemed very personal to me. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror. Not unjustified, Mr. President, I thought. The terror has not been unjustified. You don't know. Then back to the speech. The nation asks for action and action now. We must move as a trained and loyal army, willing to sacrifice for the good of a common discipline. Janie jotted down a few notes to take to class on Monday, and we listened until the speech was finished. Then she snapped off the radio and looked at me. Well, what do you think? I didn't understand all of it, I said, but what I understand makes me hope a little. It seems that he has plans, that he's going to do something about the trouble we're going through. When Lonnie talks to me about Roosevelt, he says maybe with a capital M and a question mark. Lonnie's not sure, but me, I've got a lot of confidence in this man. I don't know why, but I just have a feeling he's going to do some good for us. She looked so funny, so half plain and boyish, so half pretty and girlish. Her face was very serious. I wish I could help him. I wish I was a woman, and he'd ask me to join his cabinet. I'd like to pitch in and help him get things really moving. She looked at me suspiciously. You think I'm some kind of a nut, don't you? No, I don't. Honest, I don't. You were smiling. It's the first time I've seen you smile. I guess I'm just naturally a little sober-looking. You're like Lonnie. He's sober-looking too, but he always grins when I get excited over politics. That's because most girls your age don't think much about politics. She nodded. I know, most of the kids in my class think I'm an oddball. I don't suppose many girls tell their uncles how to vote, do they? She grinned at me a little sheepishly. That was something of a slight exaggeration, she admitted. But Lonnie does do just about what you tell him to do, I'll bet. Just about, she agreed, her lips pursed slightly. Graham says I wind him around my finger, but I don't. I don't want to dominate people. I just like to convince them. That made me laugh. It seemed so long since I had laughed that I was surprised at myself. Janie looked pleased. You're lots better, she commented. You make me feel lots better, I told her. That made her blush deeply, but she didn't act skittish or silly. She just sat there studying me for a minute. Then she said, Lonnie had a boy once. The night we drove over to pick you up, he told me that you're exactly the age Davy would have been. I didn't feel that I should talk about Lonnie's boy, so I said nothing. After a while, she continued, I loved Davy so much, and Aunt Helen, she was just about a real mother to me. After Davy died, she was never the same, though. She didn't seem to love me the way she used to, and I guess something happened between her and Lonnie. Graham won't talk about it, and I sure don't ask Lonnie things that are none of my business. I think about Aunt Helen, though, and I get a deep, lonesome feeling for her sometimes. We talked for a long time that afternoon. She gave me medicine when I coughed a lot and saw to it that the fire kept going so that the room stayed warm. She was more than a year younger than I was, and in some ways she seemed as young as Joey. Then again, at times she might have been older than I was. We played 2 games of checkers at which she beat me unmercifully the first time and rather obviously allowed me to win the second time. After that she read aloud the newspaper mostly, and her voice was nice. I closed my eyes and listened for a long time, then I slept, and when I woke up she was at the stove fixing something for supper. As I watched her I thought of Emily. She was not as beautiful as Emily, not anywhere nearly as beautiful. Still, there was something about her that was warm and friendly. I wondered idly if I'd ever fall in love with Janey. I didn't think so, but I found myself wondering. I said, "Janey, do you ever wear earrings?" She didn't even turn to look at me as she answered. "I feel like a fool in 'em," she said shortly. That seemed to settle things. The girl that I loved would have to wear earrings. Then I thought of Joey, and such things as earrings and girls, even Lonnie and security, all seemed less than nothing.